Hello friends and welcome into the Cowboys Report. I am your host Tom Downey, here to talk about, it's Zeke, you guys know what it is. Everyone's freaking out again because time's a flat circle, and once again we're all worried about Zeke Elliott. This time around, it's about a potential holdout. So there are like 4 different reports out there. We'll break them all down, what you need to know, what to believe, what you shouldn't believe, and just what the hell's going on right now with Zeke and the Cowboys. So it all started with Mr. Mike FLORIO, who says, per a league source, Elliott has privately said he will hold out of training camp unless he gets a new contract. Now, it's not a surprise that Zeke wants a new deal. He's got 2 years left. He's seeing Dak and Mark Cooper on the verge of being paid as well. He wants to get big bucks as well. And we'll break down this more in depth here in a second too, but FLORIO also says that Zeke could be looking at a deal worth about $10 million per year on his next deal, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, and we'll break down why there in a second. But first, question for you guys. What is your panic level right now for a Zeke holdout? What's it at? Rate it for me on a scale of 1 to 10. And if you need a chill pill, I have them. Feel free to DM me. I'll send you some. We'll break down maybe why that number should be a little bit lower than what I think it is for many of you out there, at least based on the Twitter freakout I saw yesterday. Now back to that $10 million number. That doesn't make any sense. Here are the highest paid NFL backs for this upcoming year based on per year averages. Gurley makes 14, Bell makes 13, David Johnson makes 13. The number that FLORIO picked for 10 was because that's what Zeke's going to make in the 5th year of his option. But of course he wants more than that. Heck, I don't know if FLORIO just didn't do the research. We're already beyond the $10 million figure. We're at 14 and beyond. Here's what Stephen Jones said back at the NFL Combine. We certainly saw what Gurley got paid, and we know that's probably where it starts, and we'll go from there. If Zeke was willing to do a $10 or $11 or even $12 million per year deal, he'd already be signed. We would already be at that point. That's not the number that I think Zeke wants. I don't know why that number was thrown in there from the FLORIO report. Of course, as I pointed out on Twitter, with no comment, now I'll issue comments here, this is not the first time we've done a FLORIO Zeke headline. Back on March 20, or back in early March, should Zeke hold out for a new deal? Then in April, are the Cowboys planning for a future without Zeke? Based on, by the way, their praise for Tony Pollard. Okay. And then, by the way, in May, Zeke reported for OTAs despite reports that he might hold out. Then in June, well, when is a deal going to happen? And then July, almost 2 weeks later, because that's the time frame we're at apparently. Zeke plans to hold out. So that's where we're at with FLORIO. Now, his report has been contradicted at various levels by others out there. First up is Patrick Walker of 24/7 Sports, friend of the show. He says that Zeke is A, still in line for an extension, which we've known about, we've discussed that many times before, and that Zeke has not made up his mind about a holdout. More on that part in a little bit here. Of course, Walker also points out that, yeah, Zeke does want a new deal. Everybody wants a new deal. Zeke is not the only back to be searching for one right now. So too is Melvin Gordon, who has already made it very clear that he's going to hold out and either get a new contract or get traded. Now, in terms of the debate between paying Gordon, paying Zeke, you have more leeway in terms of if you want to pay Zeke. Here are their career numbers. More carries for Gordon, but more yards for Zeke. Fewer receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. But I'll make note, Gordon's played in almost a full season's worth of game, about 15, more than Zeke Elliott. So when it comes down to, well, I don't believe in paying Gordon, you can still also want to pay Zeke. I think there are plenty of people out there who feel that way because Zeke is truly a premier running back, one of the best, if not the best, in the NFL. Now, more conflicting reports. Let's move to Clarence Hill. Again, we'll stick with our local guys, come back to a national guy in a minute here. Now, Clarence Hill had previously reported that a holdout was an option for Zeke Elliott. However, that was before, A, Zeke showed up to OTAs. I think it's a little weird that Zeke would go to the things that really don't matter. He would go to OTAs, go to minicamp, go to all of that, but would skip training camp. That disconnect doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. And oh, by the way, that was also before the Las Vegas issue that Zeke ran into. Now, Hill reports that Zeke has made no decision and that he hasn't ruled anything out yet either, which I think makes a ton of sense, more so than Zeke is claiming he's privately going to hold out. So what do you guys think Zeke will do? Type Y for you think he'll hold out. Type N for you think he won't. Let me know in the comments section what you think is going to happen with Zeke Elliott. We'll break down some more in depth here. I lean more towards no, he's not going to hold out, but there are some more conflicting reports you want to get into here. Next up from Mike Fisher. He kind of goes at FLORIO a little bit more than everyone else did. He says that FLORIO's source was a little bit less than of a source close to Zeke said it, and more, well, league gossip indicates that Zeke's going to hold out instead. Fisher says that Zeke, much like what Clarence Hill said, is just looking over his options, which I think makes perfect sense. That's what the Cowboys and that's what Zeke's camp should be doing. Going over what possibilities you have and deciding what's the best route to get yourself paid. Fisher also points out, by the way, that contract talks aren't close right now. We'll dive more in depth on that here in a second because I think that is noteworthy and a big reason why there is at least some rumbling of a potential Zeke holdout. But a question for you guys. If Zeke holds out and you're in charge of the Cowboys, what do you do with him? Do you trade him away? Do you just pay him whatever he wants? Or do you try and play the waiting game and, get into a staring contest involved with Zeke Elliott? So there are options there. I assume most of you will type just to pay him, but let me know what you guys think in the comment section. All right, yet another report here. This one, a national guy from Charles Robinson over at Yahoo Sports. Now, he says that this coming week is important for the Dallas Cowboys and Zeke Elliott because Zeke wants to feel confident and know that the contract talks involving Zeke and the Cowboys are headed in the right direction. He doesn't just want the platitudes from Stephen Jones saying, oh, yes, of course we're going to sign you. And meanwhile, the Cowboys behind the scenes like, now we're just going to run him to the ground, which I think is fair and understandable from Zeke. And Robinson also points out that the Cowboys and Zeke are in a good spot right now. There is no issues between the front office and player and front office and agent. They're fine. But if progress isn't made, and I think in particular behind the scenes, if Zeke feels like he's not going to get an extension ever, well, then things could get messy. By the way, Mike FLORIO Pro Football Talk only focused on the last part in his most recent article, not the whole they're fine right now element. And I get where, if this is true, and I think it is, where Zeke is coming from. Look, he's not dumb. He knows that running backs have a very short shelf life in the NFL. He knows that the best time for Zeke to get paid is probably right about this time, maybe next year too, if you want to wait a year. But the Cowboys also know, A, Zeke, we got you for 2 more years. Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, Byron Jones, Jalen Smith, those decisions need to be made before Zeke, just from a pure timing perspective. Their contracts are up after this upcoming year. That's not the case for Zeke Elliott. So that is an issue there, and it's also why, frankly, Zeke has not been the priority. And I know that that's maybe a bit unfair to perhaps one of your most important, or not perhaps, is one of your most important players, but from a timing perspective, I side more with the Cowboys on that one. All right, folks, more on Zeke here coming up. But first, do you guys like the Cowboys Report? We know a lot of you guys watch, yet you aren't actually subscribed. So if you're watching on YouTube, this is the big red button. Let's get us up closer to 50K here on the channel. If you're watching on Facebook, the link is right there, youtube.com/Dallas Cowboys Report. Now, there is a very important element that FLORIO and others haven't mentioned yet. That is the date of August 6th. That is an important deadline in the leverage battle here between Zeke and the Dallas Cowboys. Zeke Elliott has to report to the Cowboys by August 6th in order to accrue a season towards free agency. If he doesn't, that does not put him on track again to make it after his 5th-year option is over. Now, that long holdout could legitimately hurt Zeke's long-term goals. And by the way, it also gives the Cowboys leverage. Even if Zeke wants to hold out for the start of training camp, well, he's probably got to show up by August 6th, and that's still before week 1 of the preseason. And if we're being honest, does Zeke really need the 2 weeks in between? I'm not really sure that he does. So from that perspective, it gives the Cowboys a lot of leverage. Now, there are other leverage points here for Zeke, but in reality, there are 3 options here for the Cowboys and Zeke Elliott. Let's go to number 1. That's that Zeke takes a lengthy holdout and he tries to Emmitt Smith his way into getting paid by the Joneses. This one, by far, is the high-risk, high-reward type of move here. Because if the Cowboys don't blink and Zeke doesn't show up until after August 6th, that only hurts Elliott. That doesn't impact the Cowboys in terms of week 1. It only limits Elliott's bargaining points from a longer-term perspective. That's kind of the big deal. Now, Zeke does have some strong leverage points, namely, the way the Cowboys offense is built, well, they need him. Like that offense, the Cowboys offense right now is built around Elliott. They gave him the ball 300 times on the ground only this past year, featured him heavily in the passing game as well. The Cowboys offense, as Stephen Jones says, Elliott is the straw that stirs the drink. Now that's maybe a bit of an unusual analogy, but it's very accurate for this Cowboys team. Now, you can argue it's a bit of an outdated offense. Sure, I'm actually kind of on board with that. But Elliott is super critical to what the Cowboys offense wants and the way they're built need to do. Now, with that in mind, the Cowboys have also shown they're willing to play the waiting game with any and all contracts. So there is a give and take there on the leverage side of things. Number 2, his second option, is that he could hold out but still report by August 6th. That's a little bit less risky, but also, what's the point? Like, oh no, he missed a week and a half of training camp. And he got the message across, hey, I want to get paid. Maybe next year I'll be a little bit more severe with it. But it doesn't hurt himself because he'll be fine and in shape. Or the Dallas Cowboys. But it's also an empty threat, right? Like, oh no, he missed a week and a half of training camp. And he showed up like we knew he was going to anyway. And not only that, look, the Cowboys fan base, I'm generalizing here, so if you disagree, I'm sorry for not reflecting your viewpoint. The Cowboys fan base is often behind Zeke. But this is just another example of timing being terrible. Zeke, my man, if this is the route that he chooses to go, by the way, you just got off with no suspension from the NFL. You just got yourself in trouble again at Vegas. The timing is terrible. You go, oh yeah, I got in trouble, now I'm going to hold out. That's not the route that you typically want to go. Of course, heck, even from the Cowboys' perspective, Zeke skipping the first week of camp wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because it would give Tony Pollard more reps. It would give Mike Weber more reps. Wow. Darius Jackson more reps. Now, of course, you want Zeke there, but like in terms of the value, how much does the first week of camp really matter for Zeke, a player of his caliber? It's not as important as other players out there. And then finally, the third note here. That's just don't hold out at all. At this point, Zeke wouldn't be a distraction. I guess at some level he kind of already is because we're talking about it, because we have to talk about it, but maybe that's not even Zeke's fault. But this means there's no bad blood, at least that we know of, between Zeke and the Cowboys. There's no distraction, but Zeke is putting his faith solely in the Cowboys front office and them, quote-unquote, doing right by Zeke. Now, at some level, I think Zeke should be a little bit worried because he's had off-the-field issues, and the Cowboys did it once with DeMarco Murray. Ran him into the ground, didn't pay him. But I don't think now is the right timing for Zeke to actually hold out. Well, so let's put a bow on this then here. Here are the 3 options for Zeke Elliott. Number 1 is a lengthy holdout. Number 2 is hold out but report by August 6th, so you still accrue a season for free agency. And number 3, just don't hold out at all. Now, there is some leverage here to be had by Zeke, but with the timing of August 6th, with the issues he just ran into, and with the fact that, let's be honest here, FLORIO's been this story like 5 different times and hasn't come true yet, I don't think you're going to see a lengthy holdout by Zeke. I think it's a possibility here, but I wouldn't consider it like the most likely, obvious, oh, it's going to happen outcome like we know Melvin Gordon is. I do think it's telling that there hasn't been a peep out of Zeke's actual camp. I think that is noteworthy. There now have been some reports from others, but Zeke's agent said nothing. Of course, he's kind of bothered by the whole Vegas thing. So I asked you earlier about what you would do if you were the Cowboys. But if you're Zeke Elliott, what do? Do you try and play hardball with Dallas? Do you try to dare them to trade you or pay you right now? If you're Zeke Elliott, do you hold out there? I suspect most of you will say no, but let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Hey Cowboys fans, thanks for watching the Cowboys Report. If you haven't already, click right here to subscribe to our channel for all the best Cowboys coverage on the internet. That's news, rumors, highlights, mailbags, film studies, and a whole lot more. And I'm making your lives a little bit easier as well with the next Cowboys Report video right here.